There comes a moment in a woman's life when her silence speaks louder than her words, when her absence in the room is more powerful than her presence. And when she stops chasing validation, heaven starts revealing her value. Listen to me. God does not hide what is useless. He hides what is sacred. If you feel overlooked, abandoned, or hidden at this stage of your life, it is not punishment, it is protection. There are seasons when God begins to conceal his most powerful vessels, not to punish them, but to preserve them. And I'm speaking to the women in this room, especially those over 40. You've weathered storms, you've survived betrayals, you've outlived the opinions of others. And now God is hiding you, not from purpose, but for purpose. God hides strong women from distraction, because by now you have no time to waste. Your spirit has matured and your emotions have graduated. You no longer entertain chaos dressed as companionship. You no longer serve tables that do not feed your purpose. That's why he hides you. Not because you are not ready, but because you are too ready to be handled carelessly. When a woman reaches a certain level of spiritual maturity, she detaches not out of bitterness, but out of discernment. She understands that access is currency, and not everyone who wants you deserves to find you. Emotional detachment is not coldness, it is clarity. It means your identity is no longer negotiable. You've stopped apologizing for your standards because you finally understand your time is sacred, your peace is non-refundable, and your purpose cannot be negotiated. God hides strong women from emotional leeches. People who love the strength in you but never invest in the soul of you. At this age, God won't allow your strength to be drained by those who only come to consume and never to cover. He will block numbers. He will close doors. He will dry up old wells. So you stop drinking from relationships that only weaken your spirit. Sometimes, God hides you in plain sight. You're visible, but inaccessible. Present, but not available. Because your next assignment requires a different version of you. A version undistracted, undamaged, and unbothered by noise. You are not being hidden because you are forgotten. You are being hidden because you are becoming. He is preparing a stage where your gifts will no longer be ignored and your wisdom will no longer be mishandled. When God starts hiding you, he's upgrading your audience. No longer will you be tolerated in rooms where you should be celebrated. No longer will you water yourself down to be understood by people who were never assigned to your destiny. This is why your circle got smaller. This is why you feel disconnected from what used to excite you. Because elevation demands separation. And separation is the language of the hidden. Separation is the language of the hidden. Strong women in their 40s and beyond, hear me, you are not behind. You are in alignment. You are not late. You are preserved. You are not waiting. You are being readied. And when God finishes with you in the dark, he will present you to a place that knows what to do with your light. God hides you from unnecessary warfare. At this stage, you don't fight with emotions. You move with instruction. You don't argue for your worth, you embody it. The battles that used to consume you no longer qualify for your attention. Because where God is taking you, peace is not optional, it is protocol. He hides you from places that cannot steward your depth. Environments that once felt like home now feel too small. That's not you being difficult. That's God stretching your capacity. Because you can't pour into shallow people what God has deposited into your deep spirit. The woman God hides is the woman he intends to reveal in a way that shifts atmospheres. You are no longer just a presence. You are a movement. And movements are not born in crowds. They are birthed in caves. God does not conceal what is common. He conceals what carries uncommon value. When a woman has endured the trials of life, crossed the threshold of 40, and still stands in faith, wisdom, and dignity, she is no longer a product of the world's definition, but a reflection of heaven's intention. God doesn't hide her because of fear. He hides her because of function. There's a difference between being protected and being shelved. When God covers you, it is not to stop your movement, but to preserve your mission. The stronger the calling, the tighter the covering. We must understand God's pattern has always been to hide what carries destiny. Moses was hidden in a basket. David was hidden in fields. Jesus was hidden in Egypt. So when God hides a strong woman in this season of her life, it is because she has become too valuable to be casually exposed. He is not concealing her beauty. He is protecting her assignment. Because at this stage, her life is no longer about attention, it's about alignment. She no longer needs applause to function. She functions from a place of obedience, purpose, and revelation. Over 40, a woman begins to live with intent. She speaks less but says more. She shows up less but impacts more. She gives less access but carries more power. God knows that exposing her too early or too often to the wrong environments can lead to spiritual erosion. So he hides her from anything that would dilute her divine assignment. Her value is not in being seen by many, but in being reserved for the right few. What is hidden by God is not discarded. It is preserved. It is covered until the time is right and the place is prepared, because heaven does not release treasure until earth is ready to receive it. Emotional detachment in a woman over 40 is not a sign of hardness. It is a sign of healing. It is not a shield of bitterness, but a manifestation of boundaries. This detachment is not the absence of feeling. It is the presence of discernment. It means she has walked through fire, been burned, and yet chose to be refined instead of consumed. She has cried private tears, fought silent battles, and learned that peace is not something to be begged for, it is something to be protected. That God does not allow her heart to remain tied to anything or anyone that compromises her identity, distracts her destiny, or dishonors her value. You see, when a woman detaches emotionally, she begins to see with spiritual clarity. She no longer confuses connection with covenant. She no longer mistakes chemistry for calling. What used to draw her in now repels her spirit, not because it changed, but because she did. God has healed the wounds that used to seek affirmation. He has mended the places where her worth was once up for negotiation. Now she no longer attaches to what is inconsistent, unstable, or draining. She is not numb. She is wise. She's not cold. She's focused. Her emotional detachment is the fruit of spiritual awakening. This kind of woman no longer chases validation from broken people. She no longer seeks comfort in temporary things. Her soul is anchored in truth, and her identity is no longer shaped by people's presence or absence. God has taught her how to release without resentment, walk away without explanation, and love without losing herself. Detachment is not the absence of love. It is the presence of alignment. She chooses peace over pressure, assignment over attention, and purpose over pleasing. That is strength, not selfishness. That is spiritual maturity, not emotional distance. When a woman crosses into her 40s, something sacred shifts. She no longer defines herself by how many people notice her, compliment her, or applaud her. Her confidence is no longer tied to visibility. It is anchored in purpose. God begins to remove her from the spotlight of public affirmation and tucks her into the shadow of divine preservation. Because what she carries is no longer for entertainment. It's for impact. At this stage, the applause of the crowd means less than the affirmation of God. Her value is found not in how seen she is, but in how sustained she is. God hides her not because she is no longer useful, but because he is transitioning her from being seen to being sent. And being sent often requires seasons of silence, stillness, and invisibility. This woman understands that her anointing is not for show. She's not chasing platforms. She's cultivating purpose. When others run toward exposure, she walks toward preservation. She knows that what God is doing in her life is too sacred to be placed in the hands of those who only see with carnal eye. Visibility once felt like a sign of worth, but now preservation feels like protection. God is keeping her in a place where distractions cannot reach her, where shallow praise cannot inflate her, and where toxic expectations cannot manipulate her. In that hidden place, her identity is refined, her strength renewed, and her clarity sharpened. She's not diminished, she's being developed. She's not forgotten, she's being formed. And in that divine concealment, her roots go deeper than her reputation. She no longer craves the validation of the world because she knows she was never created for its applause. She was created for a divine assignment. And now her life becomes less about being seen by many and more about being chosen by God for something greater. The very idea of being a God, there are relationships that feel good to the emotions but are dangerous to the destiny. And when a woman has reached the maturity of her 40s, God begins to shield her from connections that would waste her oil. This oil, her wisdom, her presence, her discernment, her strength is not cheap. It was extracted through fire, loss, betrayal, and growth. And now God will no longer allow it to be poured into vessels that leak. He protects her from counterfeit relationships that look like purpose but function as distractions. These are the people who speak the right words but carry the wrong spirits. Those who admire her strength but are intimidated by her growth. God shields her heart from relationships that will slowly deplete her. At this stage of life, she cannot afford to be tied to what drains her emotionally, spiritually, or mentally. He protects her from charming lips with toxic intentions, from friendships built on convenience instead of covenant, from environments that reward her presence but punish her authenticity. She's no longer impressed by empty promises or distracted by flattery. Her discernment is too sharp, her calling too clear, her time too valuable. The counterfeit always shows up before the covenant. That's why God steps in and interrupts what she once prayed for, because he sees what she cannot. He breaks what she tried to build. He exposes what she tried to excuse. Not because he's punishing her, but because he's protecting her from relational traps that delay her divine assignment. He knows that one wrong relationship can sabotage years of growth, and one emotional tie can pull her off course. So he hides her heart. He sanctifies her solitude. He teaches her how to love herself without needing someone else to affirm it. She learns to embrace divine detachment and trusts that if God removes it, it was never part of her purpose. When a woman steps into her 40s with spiritual clarity, God begins to change her environment, not to punish her comfort, but to align her with her calling. There are places that once fit her, fed her, and fulfilled her, but now feel restrictive, draining, and out of season. This is not confusion, this is elevation. God is moving her away from environments that no longer match her vision, because vision always outgrows familiarity. She begins to sense a divine discomfort, not because something is wrong with her, but because something greater is awakening within her. God removes her from rooms where her voice is silenced, her wisdom dismissed, and her value tolerated instead of honored. At this stage, she doesn't belong where her presence is only accepted for what she gives, but not for who she is. Environments that once celebrated her obedience now feel threatened by her discernment. God begins to strip away attachments to old spaces, not because they were always bad, but because they've become too small. Growth demands atmosphere, and the woman God is forming in this season cannot thrive in places that suffocate her vision. God knows that the soil she is rooted in determines the fruit she produces. So he uproots her from toxic patterns, dry circles, and stale systems. He positions her where her gifts are cultivated, not copied, where her silence is understood, not misjudged, where her presence ignites, not intimidates. And though it may feel lonely, it is strategic. Her assignment requires clarity. Her vision requires alignment. Her purpose requires the right platform. She is no longer available to environments that exhaust her peace and starve her spirit. God is shifting her from the crowd to the core, from exposure to intimacy, from survival to significance. Because where she's going, she needs space to soar. There are seasons in life when silence is not absence, it is divine strategy. When a woman over 40 finds herself in isolation, separated from familiar circles, disconnected from what once gave her rhythm, it is not rejection, it is recalibration. God is not removing her for no reason. He is resetting her for a greater revelation. He isolates to insulate. He separates to strengthen. Because when purpose reaches a certain depth, distractions must decrease. Isolation becomes the womb where identity is refined, assignments are clarified, and unnecessary noise is silenced. The woman in this season often feels invisible, not because she has lost value, but because God has hidden her worth. He shields her from external influence so he can amplify internal revelation. The spotlight is turned off so the searchlight of his spirit can go deeper. In this space, she is no longer performing for approval. She is being purged for assignment. Her prayers grow more intense, her discernment more sharp, her focus more sacred. God is preparing her for something that demands a version of her that cannot be shaped by the crowd, only by his presence. While others are building publicly, she is being rebuilt privately. And the temptation is to question the silence, to think something is wrong. But in truth, God is making space for something that noise cannot produce. Isolation is not a punishment, it is an honor. It is the evidence that heaven is working on her behind the scenes. Her influence is being upgraded, her voice is being recollected, her steps are being redirected. She is being pulled away, not because she's unworthy, but because her next level cannot be reached with old distractions. The isolation is sacred. It is not the end of connection. It is the beginning of consecration. There comes a point in a strong woman's journey, especially after 40, when God begins to hide her from those who once depended on her strength, but never honored her soul. These are the people who clung to her for what she could do, not for who she truly was. They celebrated her resilience, but ignored her exhaustion. They came to her for answers, but never asked about her pain. And now, God is removing her from the reach of those who only know how to receive, not how to reciprocate. He is shielding her from those who love her power but are uncomfortable with her vulnerability. A woman who has endured, served, lifted, carried, and sustained others for years begins to understand that strength without rest becomes survival, not purpose. She realizes that being needed is not the same as being valued. So God steps in and begins a divine separation. He pulls her out of one-sided relationships. He creates distance where there was once constant access. And the woman at first may feel confused by this pulling away, but over time, she starts to breathe again. She starts to heal in spaces where she no longer has to be the strong one every hour of the day. This woman no longer tolerates being emotionally exploited. Her strength is no longer available for people who refuse to grow, who depend on her to do for them what they should do for themselves. She starts to protect her energy, her presence, and her peace. God begins to restore her soul in solitude. He teaches her that her vulnerability is sacred and only safe hands should hold it. She is not cold. She is careful. Not distant, just discerning. Because now she understands that her strength is not for everyone to use, and her soul is not for everyone to touch. When God hides a strong woman over 40, it's not to bury her. It's to build her for a revelation that only certain environments can receive. She's not missing, she's been reserved. Reserved for an atmosphere that has the maturity to recognize her worth and the humility to receive her wisdom. God does not invest decades of experience, tears, trials, and transformation into a woman just to place her before people who can't handle her depth. Her voice is not common. Her story is not shallow. Her spirit has been through dimensions of pain and levels of healing that the average room can't comprehend. So God waits. He waits until the atmosphere matches the anointing. In this divine waiting, her confidence grows, not in herself alone, but in her understanding of who she is in Him. She stops rushing to be seen. She no longer auditions for rooms. She's done shrinking to fit spaces that were never designed for her full capacity. The woman she has become cannot be planted in shallow soil. She requires environments that can cultivate her vision without competing with it. Spaces that honor her silence, not just her service. This woman no longer moves by invitation, she moves by assignment. If the atmosphere is not ready to handle her presence with reverence, God will keep her hidden. Because exposure without preparation leads to exploitation. But when the environment is right, God will reveal her in such a way that no one can deny her placement. She will not have to strive to be accepted. She will simply show up and be recognized. Because what is truly anointed doesn't beg for a platform. It transforms one by His very presence. And that's why God hides her, not from people, but from premature release into places that cannot hold her calling. There is a point in a strong woman's life, especially after the age of 40, when God begins to shift her warfare. The battles she used to fight with her hands, her emotions, and her energy are no longer worthy of her presence. This is not avoidance, it is evolution. God is not calling her to fight less. He is calling her to fight differently. Her weapons have changed. Her battleground has elevated. What she once addressed with anger, she now answers with silence. What used to shake her now reveals her stability. She has become a woman who does not react. She responds with wisdom, with discernment, with spiritual authority. God begins to hide her from battles that were designed to distract her, not develop her. She no longer entertains arguments that prove nothing, relationships that drain everything, or conflicts that stir up unnecessary noise. She has come to a place of divine focus. Her time is too valuable, her assignment too specific. When she was younger, she fought to survive. Now, she fights to stay in alignment. And that means choosing peace over pride, clarity over chaos, and purpose over pressure. This woman now realizes that not every battle is hers to fight, and not every invitation to conflict requires her presence. She understands that some warfare is meant to be ignored, not engaged. Her wisdom has become her weapon. Her stillness has become her strategy. And her ability to walk away without explanation is no longer a sign of weakness. It is a mark of maturity. God hides her from unnecessary warfare because He's calling her into strategic influence. Her energy is reserved for things that build, not things that break. She now operates under a mantle that doesn't chase noise, it creates movement. And her absence from the battlefield is not a retreat, it is a repositioning. When a woman has matured spiritually, emotionally, and mentally, especially after 40, God begins to guard her access like a gatekeeper guards a palace. She is no longer easily reachable, not because she is arrogant, but because she has finally realized that her presence is a gift, not a guarantee. Her time, her words, her energy, and her spirit have become sacred. And God will no longer allow them to be thrown into places that treat them as common. She is no longer a public well for everyone to draw from. She is a private reservoir that flows only where God sends her. Being hidden is not a demotion, it is a promotion in the realm of spiritual authority. She is not avoiding people, she is discerning them. Every invitation is weighed, every request is prayed through, every relationship is evaluated through the lens of purpose, because access to her is no longer a matter of familiarity, it is a matter of alignment. God is teaching her that being available to everyone leaves her vulnerable to anything. So he builds a hedge around her discernment, a wall around her time, and a filter over her spirit. At this level, she understands that her influence is not for entertainment, it's for transformation. And transformation cannot happen in places that are not prepared. So God allows doors to close, people to fall away, and certain platforms to pass by, not because she's unworthy, but because the space cannot carry what she now carries. She is operating from a realm where her value must be recognized before her voice is received. Her presence now requires maturity. Her advice requires humility, and her love requires honor. If the atmosphere does not match the weight of her wisdom, God will keep her hidden until it does. So to every strong woman over 40 who feels hidden, overlooked, or set apart, understand this: you are not being buried, you are being planted. God does not hide what he has not first healed, refined, and anointed. Your silence is sacred, your solitude is strategic, and your season of being unseen is heaven's way of preparing you for a level of impact that shallow places could never carry. You are not forgotten. You are being forged. You are not behind, you are being built. And when God reveals you, it won't be for attention, it will be for assignment. It won't be to impress the world, but to disrupt it with divine purpose. So don't mourn the hiding, embrace it. Because when God finishes with you, no man, no system, and no season will be able to dim the light he's placed within you. You are hidden, not because you are weak, but because you are dangerous to the darkness. Stay hidden until heaven says move.